I watched Obsession, and I took a bunch of notes, and then I rewatched Obsession and took more notes, and then I read all of these books, and then I watched a few more movies, and then I rewatched Obsession. And if you know me, I'm a pretty relaxed guy. So today we're going to talk about love and greed and consumption in Obsession. Here's my kind of thesis point on this video, is that love and lust and appetite and greed all feel like the same things inside of our bodies, and centuries of stories have made us think, oh, they are, even though they're not. Here's the thing. I think Obsession is a lot deeper and a lot richer of a story than a lot of people give it credit for. So we're going to go through several different portions of this video. Number one, we're going to go through myth, philosophy, and poetry that develops our ideas of love. Next, we're going to go through Wuthering Heights, which I think is deeply, deeply related to Obsession. After that, we're going to go through Luca Guadagnino's filmography in contrast to Wuthering Heights and Obsession. And then finally, we're going to get to Obsession. And don't worry, that has a huge swath of time because there is a lot to talk about with this movie that is super relevant. If you don't want spoilers, go watch Obsession, Call Me By Your Name, and Bones and All. Everything else is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. So I don't really care to warn you about it. You'll figure it out on your own. I want to start off with the Christian Bible. I think it's a very good starting off point for kind of one of the points that I am making about this, is that we see the book of Song of Solomon. Now, if you're not, a Christian or someone who uses the Christian Bible regularly, you might not have heard of Song of Solomon. But essentially, Song of Solomon is this love poetry that Solomon writes to one of his wives. And when I say one of his wives, he had 600. So he better be good at this. And in Song of Solomon, we constantly see this language comparing his lover's body to fruits. We see him comparing her lips as being like honey. She says his cheeks are like beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. So all the things that are said in Song of Solomon are very early on in this video relating the idea of love and passion and desire as something to kind of be related to appetite and consumption. And I want to clarify, that's not for no reason. Lust comes from the Proto-Germanic languages, and it's where we get the word list, which means to wish or desire. So when you're saying a wish list, you're kind of just saying a wish or something like that. Appetite comes from the Latin root word appetitus, which means to want or desire. Greed comes from the Old English greedy or gredig, meaning voracious or hungry. Even the word covet comes from the word cupid or cupidere, literally Cupid, and it means to desire. See, from the very roots of our language, love, lust, desire, and appetite all kind of mean the same thing. And it's somewhat unclear as to what the real difference is other than vibes. So this idea of love being a consuming thing and this devouring thing goes way far back. It's in a ton of our old stories. Think of the story of Kronos. Kronos was a titan, and he was the father of all the gods. And when a prophecy came that his children would overthrow him, just like he overthrew his father, he ate his children. And I think this is a really interesting depiction of cannibalism as love, because yes, on the one hand, it's shown as being this almost primitive, disgusting act, but on the other hand, it can be interpreted as fatherly love. They're not going to get hurt if they're in his stomach. Another old story that I would really recommend you go read if you haven't is the story of Tereus and Philomela. So Tereus was this king, and he went to visit his wife's sister, and in that he assaulted his wife's sister and then cut out her tongue so that she couldn't tell on him, basically. When the sisters finally got together again, they realized the wicked things that he did, and so they killed his own child and forced him to eat his own child. They cooked the child in a stew so that he didn't know, but he still ate his own child. Even in later folklore, we see such cases of greed and overconsumption, like in the stories of Hansel and Gretel. The witch is there to fatten up the kids and eat them. And that's where I kind of want to provide a counterpoint, is we see all these really old stories of this really dark cannibalism that is forced upon people, this desire and hunger that these gods or man has for other people. And I think the antithesis of that is the idea of consuming another in the New Testament. So in the New Testament, in Luke 22:19, Jesus says, "And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" The "do this" that he's talking about is eating the bread, which he is saying is his body. Later he says the wine is his blood. It's this idea of this figure giving his body to be consumed because of the love he has, and through this consumption, the people around him will be saved. And through that, we go on to our next books, which are Plato and Aristotle. And I want to start with that love that was talked about in the New Testament was called agape love. And agape love in Greek kind of means this unconditional, self-sacrificing love to give to other people. It's called agape love. And there's some other types of love that I want to talk about as well. So Aristotle actually talks about filial love. And filial love is this deep friendship understanding of another person, this deep understanding of what is good for them, this deep understanding of their lives and who they truly, really are. That's filial love. Alternatively, we also have Plato's version of love, and in Plato's version of love exists in several other places as well, but it's this idea of eros. And eros love is this kind of deep desire and this visceral need to possess. In the Symposium written by Plato, he talks about this, he talks about a few other things. He also talks about something with Aristophanes talking to him. Aristophanes says that the reason there are two different genders and two different sexes, and the reason we seek love, is because way back in the beginning, humans once had two faces and 4 arms and 4 legs. But then they started plotting against the gods, so Zeus cut them in half, leaving everyone to always seek a soulmate to feel whole again. And mind you, I'm not going to say that without acknowledging that Aristophanes also said some other really crazy things in this text that I do not agree with. And I don't necessarily agree with that early story of humans being cut in half. I don't believe that, but it's an idea that I think is worth thinking about. Why are people so drawn to love? We see this so often in media and in real life, people desperately wanting to find the person that's theirs. But what does that mean? See, these Greek texts give us context for one of Nikki's early lines when she's still herself in obsession. In the car with Bear, she's talking about the book she's writing, and Bear teases her a little bit, and she says,
"No, it's not a romance, it's a love story."
Now, this can mean one of two things. Either it's a love story that has no sense of romantic love in it. Maybe it's a mother and daughter or a father and son. Or alternatively, and I think this is more likely, it's a story about romantic love, but in a deep, twisted way. More on this later. A lot of our oldest texts and even literary research is connected to this idea that love and desire is deeply connected to greed and consumption and desire to possess, even down to the actual language. The words all mean very similar things, if not the exact same thing. See, Bear from the outset is not agape, self-sacrificing loving Nikki, and he's not even really philia, deep friendship loving Nikki. From the very beginning of the story, he is Eros loving Nikki, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We're going to complicate that term a lot as we move forward. And what's incredible about this writing is that when you first see all of the things he does, you don't necessarily immediately go, oh wow, he's awful. Like, if you were in this situation, you'd be pretty freaked out too. You wouldn't necessarily know what to do either. But upon a second watch, knowing what his actions lead to, everything he does seems a lot more sinister. I mean, in their more normal conversations that they have near the beginning, the only thing Bear and Nikki really talk about is high school and old memories they created. They're not creating anything new. He's not trying to deeply understand her. He's actually talking about his experience from what he knows of her, his experience loving her. But in this case, it's Eros love. It's not the agape, self-sacrificing love, and it's not the philia, deep friendship love. It really does just seem like Eros love. So the first book that comes to mind, ironically, is Wuthering Heights, and Emily Bronte is the master of Gothic literature. This genre is defined by decaying setting, possession or the supernatural, and women who are threatened by tyrannical or insane men. But in this, Bronte wrote a story that no one else could. The entire text is haunted, both literally and metaphorically, by the love between Kathy and Heathcliff. And Catherine's most famous line, I think, is super relevant to obsession. In this scene, it's in chapter 9, it's Catherine talking to one of her servants about saying yes to marrying another man while she loves Heathcliff. And she says this: "It would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how I love him, and that not because he's handsome, Nelly, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same." She goes on a page later to say, "Nelly, I am Heathcliff. He's always, always in my mind, not as a pleasure any more than I am always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being." Don't get me wrong, this is an incredible novel with levels of depth I couldn't even begin to make a video about, let alone fit into this small segment. But I think it's taught generations of readers something unwittingly. And I get it, for some people, I Am Heathcliff is the ultimate romance. But Emily Bronte does guide us to the natural endpoint of where this love might lead to. A normal response to someone losing someone else would be grief. You had this person you connected with, maybe on a soul level, that you can no longer connect with anymore because they're not available. Later in the novel, once Catherine dies, Heathcliff tries to destroy everything that was around Catherine because of this love as possession view. Because he viewed Catherine as part of himself as well, he also viewed losing her, both in marriage where he couldn't possess her and in death where he begged her ghost to haunt him. He viewed that loss as a theft from him because in his eyes, it was part of himself. Here's something I want to clarify. Catherine and Heathcliff's reactions to losing the other are completely rational from their viewpoint. Something got stolen from them that in their eyes was theirs and was literally a piece of their soul. They thought they deserved it. And so they can excuse any number of horrible things because of that. I think another point to be made about Wuthering Heights is that it's a ghost story about possession, but not the kind you're thinking of. See, Catherine throughout the texts haunts everything. Her ghost is constantly mentioned by Heathcliff and others. People say they see her on the grounds of Wuthering Heights, but she's not the one doing the possession. In fact, the ones doing the possession might be darker and more sinister. The real evil possession written about in this novel by Emily Bronte was people's possession of things, whether it was who possessed Wuthering Heights, or who possessed Thrushcross Grange, or who possessed Kathy, or who possessed Heathcliff. or any number of things they could possess. That's what the whole story is about. It's about the evils that come about when we put too much weight in the things we possess. I think going off of this, something that I thought of when rereading Wuthering Heights was Shakespeare's poems, his sonnet 129. I feel like Shakespeare's sonnet 129 distills the idea of Wuthering Heights in verse. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action until action lust, is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight, past reason hunted and no sooner had. Past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit and in possession so, had having and in quest to have extreme. A bliss in proof and proved a very woe, before a joy proposed behind a dream. All this the world well knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. See here, lust and even love is described as predatory and self-devouring, desire chasing its object like bait and swallowing it whole. Even at the end, when Shakespeare is talking about hell, there are times when Kathy is talking about how this love will damn her to hell. Even these are writers at an early stage writing that hunger and love are not the same, and treating them as such could lead to bad things. I'd argue that Obsession's protagonist, Bear, is just a descendant of Heathcliff. He feels the same entitlement, but it's masked with something a little bit different. We, as a rational audience, know that Bear is in the wrong, but honestly, at least on the first watch, it's a little hard not to feel bad for the guy. This is an insane situation to be put in, and he's supposed to know how to deal with it, and we can feel bad for him all we want, but truly honestly, I think if you look at his actions throughout the film, we see nothing but a desire to possess Nikki. His actions time and time again show that he doesn't feel love for Nikki, he feels entitled to her. If Heathcliff and Bear are what total consumption looks like when nothing holds back, I do want to look at the other end of the spectrum, because as it turns out, that's not the way love has to end. And I think there's a very thoughtful director who can show us something different. See, a filmmaker that I think is really thoughtful about his portrayal of love and consumption in love is Luca Guadagnino. And in his film, Call Me By Your Name, there are already a lot of motifs that draw back to the Song of Solomon, such as fruit and consumption in that way. You know what I'm talking about. The title of the movie, Call Me By Your Name, itself is an abridged version of one of the movie's most famous lines, "Call me by your name, and I'll call you by mine." Admittedly, this line is very reminiscent to I Am Heathcliff. But there is one distinct difference, and it's that the language in both sentences operate in opposite ways. See, I Am Heathcliff assumes the very being of a person. It takes on their very existence. Call Me By Your Name acknowledges that this person is separate in their own. They're simply asking to understand the person in a deeper way. I Am Heathcliff unconsensually takes the other person's identity, who they are, their whole soul. Whereas Call Me By Your Name asks the person, and then it is just imagination that happens afterwards. They're not saying, treat me like I'm you. And this movie's a little different than our previous entries because it shows our protagonists as having a relationship that keeps getting sharper and more real, while they also stay two separate people. At the end of the movie, there's this long shot of Elio after Oliver left. And it's Elio crying because of Oliver's departure and marriage of a woman. That's grief. The grief in this scene proves that that boundary was always real and important. If Elio was like Heathcliff, he would have gone and tried to ruin Oliver's marriage or life or lives of the people around him. But he didn't do that. He just grieved. Moving to another one of Guadagnino's films, Bones and All, it's weird to say the least. This movie follows Marin and Lee, who, for whatever reason, feel the desire to consume people. It's also worth noting that the people they desire to consume do tend to be people they seem somewhat attracted to, at least. Marin and Lee's hunger is a real, tangible thing that they constantly have to deal with throughout the movie, but it's never explained away with some strange philosophy. In fact, I'd argue that the main romantic act between them is restraint. As we see their relationship develop, we see their wariness about each other fall away, and we see the both of them choosing repeatedly not to feed on each other. To call back to the biblical allegories yet again, at the end of the film, while Lee lays dying from a wound from someone else, he tells Marin to literally consume him. He's giving his body to help her. This is a direct reference to Luke 22. Guadagnino has a consistent through line with his work. His character's appetite is real and constant in all of it, but his characters are consistently defined by what they choose not to do with that appetite. Elio never says, "I am Oliver," and Marin never decides to kill Lee and eat him. So Guadagnino's work does provide a different view of love. It's that wanting to have someone doesn't necessarily disqualify you from actually loving them. What tells you what actually is happening is what you do with that desire to have them. Think back to the beginning of the video. I made a specific point to clarify that Eros wasn't necessarily a bad thing. In Guadagnino's work, we see Eros actively portrayed in the protagonist characters, and what it means to truly agape love them when that Eros love exists with it. Every character in Guadagnino's work feels that Eros love to one thing or even many things, but they don't necessarily act on it. They show that agape, that unconditional, self-sacrificing love, because they know that's the true love that will help the other person. Both Catherine and Heathcliff feed on other people and the entitlement they feel towards things until there's nothing left. Guadagnino's couples don't do that. This isn't to say that Bronte is morally corrupt at all. I think she wanted to tell this specific story for this specific reason. It just means that her characters are far more likely to act in a morally corrupt way. If we look at Bear, I don't think we once see him make the choice not to feed on Nikki. He is consistently shown to make only the decisions that give him what he wants. Now we have a lot of vocabulary in place. We've talked about the Bible, we've talked about Greek philosophers, to queer movies of the 21st century. We've covered a lot. Let's fully return to Obsession using the language I've put in place. I'm gonna walk you through what happens. So if you haven't seen it, I really would recommend you see it because I'm about to spoil everything. Bear's opening monologue is centered around what Nikki does for him. He even says, "You're in every song I listen to." Is that cringe? Yeah, but forgive me if this is a stretch. In his opening lines, he compares her to the stuff he is consuming. He even says, "If I don't play it cool, I'm afraid I will lose her," or something along those lines. But that language specifically indicates that to lose her, he has to have her in some way, which truthfully, he doesn't. It's showing that Bear is overly infatuated with her. He's obsessed. Next, he comes home to his cat, who dies from eating his grandma's medicine, and he shows very little remorse for it. Even the title card scene immediately after the cat death, where he's crying, we hear him whining about Nikki. He goes out to trivia and is unable to be authentic with Nikki in any way. He doesn't tell her that the cat is dead. He doesn't even seem to be saying anything quite honest. Then he drives Nikki home and they banter, and she says the line, "It's not a romance, it's a love story." He breaks the One Wish Willow, asking for Nikki to love him, to which she immediately comes out of her house, acting very strangely and very interested in it. He then takes her home. That should have been the first nope. More weird things go on, and he essentially has to take care of her in her deeply unsettled state, but he also takes advantage of her. When they wake up to go to work, she set a shrine up for Sandy. second big nope. When she appears at Bear's house after work the next day, she's completely obscured in darkness, but not her surroundings, only her. Nikki's not there anymore, literally and metaphorically. Throughout this, Ian tries time and time again to get Bear to be serious about what's going on with Nikki and the situation she's in. Even letting Bear know that apparently the same day they fell in love, Nikki had told Sarah that Bear was like a little brother, not a lover. Later, after a deeply uncomfortable scene of the two sleeping together, he leaves through his thoroughly taped door to go to work, to which she pees and vomits on the floor. At work, she tricks Bear into consuming his own cat. He then tries to cancel his own wish. The operator says that they can't do that, but he could cancel himself. And then the operator puts real Nikki on the other line, and she's screaming in torment. Then Bear just goes inside and tries to talk to Nikki as if everything's normal about going to the party alone. Of course, crazy possessed Nikki doesn't let that happen. She ends up going to the party and tells a deeply, thoroughly unsettling story about the siblings Hansel and Gretel from the perspective of Gretel, who's deeply, disturbingly infatuated with Hansel. She then stabs herself in the face while Bear does nothing. That night, as Sarah is texting him to come talk to her, real Nikki breaks through and begs Bear to kill her. This time, the lighting switched. She's in the light, he's in the darkness. He won't kill her. When Bear is in the car with Sarah, Sarah expresses interest in him, and frankly, he reciprocates a little bit. She then tells him that Nikki has been sleeping with Ian. After this, possessed Nikki murders her. After helping Nikki move the body, now is when he decides enough is enough and goes and puts an end to it. With his one-wish willow, Ian wishes for $1 billion, gets it, and is promptly killed by Nikki fully cosplaying as Sarah when he enters Bear's house. He gives Nikki a one-wish willow, and when she won't use it, he goes to the bathroom to end it once and for all. But as soon as he takes the same pills that his cat had eaten, he tries to make himself throw up. He hasn't actually learned, except right as he is about to throw up, Nikki wishes for him to love her. He goes to the living room, chokes on his own vomit, and leaves Nikki to deal with all of the wreckage. So, if you haven't gotten my point yet, Obsession is a gothic horror. Not only that, but it's actually very similar to Wuthering Heights. Going back to Wuthering Heights and describing gothic literature, what did I say about it? Number one, it has a decaying setting. Bear's house and his own mind is actively more vile and disgusting as the story moves on. It has supernatural and possession. This has both, and not only that, in many ways it mirrors Wuthering Heights. Nikki is both possessed by some unknown entity, as well as literally possessed by Bear with his wish. We're going to talk about that more later. And then finally, it has a woman who is threatened by a tyrannical or insane male figure. I feel like this could somehow be my most controversial, but it's the most obvious one to me. Very quickly, Bear realizes that something is deeply, deeply wrong with Nikki. And soon after that, he realizes it's his own fault. At what point does he actually try to stop what's happening? At the point the real Nikki breaks through and expresses terror at the situation? At the point she feeds him his cat? Should have been that, but no. At the point she actively harms herself? The point at which he actually tries to go back and change what he did is when two things happen at the same time. Number one, a better prospect comes along with Sarah, whom Nikki promptly killed. And number two, he realized that he couldn't fully possess her. In that conversation with Sarah, he learned that Nikki had been sleeping with Ian. I don't think he could handle that. He realized he would never have all of her. There was still her past. As well as the fact that he could not fully control her actions. She was going to do these things like kill Sarah, and he couldn't stop her from doing that. Additionally, in my relation to Wuthering Heights, I will make a quick sidebar. For any Wuthering Heights fans out there, you can make this relation yourself. Sarah actually acts in a very similar way that Nellie acts in Wuthering Heights, giving and withholding information from the other characters based on seemingly circumstance and will. This is another really deep connection that I think is worth noting because of all of the other deep similarities. Anyway, Bear never treated Nikki as something beyond an object to be had. Back to the comment about Bear possessing Nikki with his wish, and this relating directly to Wuthering Heights, one of Nikki's first lines after Bear broke the one-wish willow is very telling. She says, "I did just lose my cat, Bear." What does that mean? It's saying the same thing as I am Heathcliff, just with an extra layer. It means that possessed Nikki is unable, at least at the beginning of this, to tell the difference between herself and Bear. In her possessed mind, they are one. This all being said, I truly do not believe that Bear thought he was capable of everything that happened in this film. But at heart, I believe he's just like Kathy and Heathcliff, if not worse. No, there was no reason for him to believe some old novelty toy was actually going to turn Nikki into a lunatic. But his actions following that are all excused in a deluded self-belief that he loved her enough to justify it. He continued to allow her to hurt other people and herself to get what he wanted out of the situation. It wasn't love, it was obsession, it was appetite. It was greed. I'll go a step further and say this. Bear treated Nikki literally as a pet. Think about it. He changes her mere hours after his cat dies. Then, he consistently shows her the same carelessness he showed the cat. I mean, he left the bottle open, and let me tell you, those things are not easy to get off. So he actively left that bottle open in a place where the cat could get to it. And then cleaning it up, he just threw it in the trash can. In a similar way, she pees and vomits on the floor, and then he has her clean it up, providing no help. And when she hurts herself at the party, he does absolutely nothing while all of his friends are screaming at him to help. But the most damning evidence is the moment in which she makes him consume his cat, just like he is consuming her. Obviously, the question isn't, is this love or possession? If you've listened to me at all, you already know that it's possession. But one of the scariest parts of the film is that I believe Bear truly realizes what he's doing far before he ever chooses to stop it. And in many ways, he seems like an alright person, but he actively participates in this horrifically evil fantasy just to get what he wants. The question isn't, is this love or possession? Rather, the question is, how can we know that we wouldn't do the same thing? Who's to say that we don't do it already? See, the unfortunate truth about this topic is that this isn't something you can figure out or answer by just introspecting harder. Bear knew what he was doing, as did Heathcliff. They just believed from their own vantage point that it was right and fair. See, in terms of love and greed and the desire to possess, the feeling inside you itself will never tell you which one you're in. The only real evidence is what you do when you have the chance to fully consume the other person and don't. Your actions are the sum of what you are, morally speaking. Think back to everything we've covered. Heathcliff had the chance to let Catherine go and instead spent decades trying to reclaim what he felt he was owed. Elio and Marin had the chance to close the distance completely and instead chose to let the other person stay separate, in that act keeping the other whole. And Bear had every chance, over and over, to stop, or at least try, and every single time, Bear chose himself. See, we've talked about things ranging from Chronos to Communion, from Wuthering Heights to Call Me By Your Name, with Obsession lying squarely in the middle of it all. I think the question that I actually want to ask you guys is not, do you actually love someone, but rather, what have you actually done when wanting them collided with what was best for them? We started this video with Plato's Split Open Human, someone who's spending their whole lives trying to connect back with their soulmate. And maybe that hunger never really goes away. Maybe it's not supposed to. Going back to the idea of all of these different types of love, my final point on Bear is that if it was anything, it was Eros. Not that Eros was necessarily a bad thing. Eros is just fine if it goes with something else. In fact, Eros is a good thing if it goes with something else. But if it's the only thing, then that's just a hunger. That's just a greed. I want to bring up one final point. I want you to think about Bear standing in the wreckage of everything that he caused, and he insisted right until the end that he was right. I want you to think for a moment about his last actions before Nikki broke the One Wish Willow. What was he doing? He was trying to make himself throw up. In trying to make himself throw up, he was trying to keep himself alive. Which means he only had one other option, which was to kill Nikki. All along, Bear never cared for Nikki. She was expendable to him. And at the end of the day, he was going to kill Nikki. He just couldn't get away with it. Finally, he loved Nikki the way she loved him, and he died. Compare that to Marin and Lee, or Elio and Oliver. That grief over losing the other person is how we know we do love. It's how we know that the love was real and that no inappropriate boundaries were crossed. The difference between love and greed is almost nothing. They can feel almost identical, and the movies will keep letting them feel identical. The only way to tell the difference is to watch your own hands. Okay, with all of that being said, I'm sorry if this was a heavy subject, but if you've watched through the whole thing, I mega appreciate you. You're the best. I would really love to have a reason to keep making these videos. Please let me know in the comments anything else you want to make videos about, anything about this video that you found interesting, any add-ons. I want this to be a place where we can discuss and deeply analyze some of this art that we love. Please make sure to like and subscribe. That really helps me out, especially being a small creator. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.